So last episode we were talking about film theory and the death of the author and all that. Now this time we're talking about a foreign film. This show's getting way too classy, way too fast. Rise of the Kumquat. This is apple juice, I swear. Seriously, look at it. Apple juice. Why is it impossible to say apple juice without sounding like a 6-year-old? Post your thoughts in the comments while this 8-second intro plays. Alright, welcome back to another episode of Why Don't You Love? Today we're talking about White God. It's a Danish film that came out in December 2014 and it is super cool. Now I know what you're saying. Foreign film? You listen here, sonny. Me and Betsy here didn't come to no movie theater to do some reading. It's gonna be okay. And yeah, I know where you're coming from. Like, there's this weird stigmatism about foreign films that, like, we all assume it's like those weird, like, French black and white, like, experimental films.
Ne sont pas possibles. Pourtant, tu t'as poussé.
But once you actually get into White God, it's actually really easy to follow. These characters are relatable. Aside from the main conflict of the story, there's no real cultural divide between the US and Hungary. The main girl is really likable, the dad's likable. All the main characters are likable and you can understand where they're coming from. And you're already like reading the like expressions of the dog throughout most of the movie. So like you're used to not just looking at like the words they're saying, but then also their inflection and their attitudes and all that. And once you get past like the fact that, oh, I gotta read the subtitles at the bottom of the screen, it isn't that difficult to get into. And yeah, let's get right down into it. This dog is insane. This dog is better than most actors working in Hollywood right now. In the final scene of this movie, this dog shows more emotion on his face than Kristen Stewart has showed during her entire career. And my film professor, when he showed this film, was like, yeah, we're gonna see some good dog acting out of this movie. And I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. What's he gonna follow the tennis match or whatever? Not only was this dog a convincing dog, this dog was a convincing person. And that's a crucial part to the beginning of this movie because when we're setting up the characters and we're setting up the main conflict of the movie, it's important to like everyone involved, even the dad. So basically the initial premise of this movie is that this little girl is living with her dad for the summer, her parents are divorced, and she has this mutt. But in Hungary there's a fine for mixed breed dogs because they assume they're like feral or like all that type of stuff. It doesn't really go that much into that, so there's one like thing where you might want to do research on. I probably should have done it before making this video, but whatever. And so in the initial part of this movie, when they're trying to hide the dog, but then like everyone knows about it and the gig's up and the dad goes, you know, I can't afford to take care of both of you, so we gotta get rid of this dog. And that first initial part of the movie, you grow attached to both the girl and the dog. As a dog person, this dog is freaking adorable. He totally has a personality and does like that thing where like, it'll be like up in the middle of the night and he'll start howling and then that howling turns into like straight up talking. You know what I'm talking about when dogs talk. Seriously, it's impossible to not get attached to this guy in the first, 15 minutes. So when the dad says, I'm sorry, but we gotta get rid of this dog, it's legitimately heart-wrenching. And so the entire movie is this dog going on adventures and this girl having to deal with the dog no longer being there and then just there two separate ways and then them coming back together at the very end. All these people this week are going to be talking about Finding Dory and Finding Nemo and all these Pixar movies that made you cry and made you sad. And I'm just saying, the first 10 minutes of Up are a walk in the park compared to the emotional roller coaster ride you go on in this movie. Granted, the first 10 minutes of Up is more condensed and it's more like, okay, here's all the emotion at once. But this movie is legitimately like all the directors from Breaking Bad throughout the series got together and said, hey, you know what we should do? Let's make a really messed up version of Homeward Bound. That's seriously what it feels like, man. Except there's no dialogue with the dogs. The dogs don't talk. You just see them communicate with each other. But you can follow the story so clearly and there's just so many dogs in this movie. Seriously, you see it at the very beginning and the very end of the movie. Just the sheer scale of like, alright, here's like 1,000 dogs that are all gonna be running down the street. And they're running free throughout Hungary. Well, the country of Hungary, but I'm sure they're also Hungry. And I know, claiming this movie is sadder than the first 10 minutes of Up, yeah, that's a bold claim. But show me the part in Up that had a dog fighting montage. Yeah, that's not a Rocky training montage you want to be a part of. Da-na-na, na-na-na, na-na-na. It's not fun. It's pretty messed up. It gets some emotion out of you. But again, like Breaking Bad, there's just the whole movie just beating on people, and beating on the people you love, and the main character, and the dog, and just, they all have such terrible luck. And then they'll catch a break and end up doing something where you're like, yeah, that's not good, but you got revenge, so that's awesome. You get just beat down on the characters, and finally they get their release, and you're like, you know what? You go screw up this town. You go mess up everyone. I don't know if I'm giving away spoilers on this. I really don't want to spoil it, but the big draw of this movie isn't necessarily the story, it's how it's executed. It's how emotion is portrayed and how these dogs act and just the feels you get. Now, the big theory surrounding this movie is that it's an allegory for the Syrian refugees there in Europe. And yeah, I can really see that. I can see how that could be the main focus of this movie. And what I like about it is that following the death of the author thing, it's not overly preachy. I mean, okay, making the Syrian refugees being represented by dogs, I mean, you're kind of playing it in their favor a little bit. No, we're being totally unbiased. Here's a Syrian refugee. Look at his little face. No, you're clearly portraying a certain worldview there, but I'm not gonna hold it against you because it's not, like, in your face. But really, you can also look at this movie as it's just showing, in general, how a few bad apples can ruin the bunch. If we are following the Syrian refugee thing, there are some points in this movie where we're like, oh, there's my point on it. Because these dogs do some stuff where you're like, yeah, no, that probably would cause some public panic and make people not really be so much into mutts. And in spite of that earlier point I made where they're represented by these cute dogs, like, it really doesn't give any definitive answers on how to solve that problem. All in all, this is a fantastic movie. It's very sad, but at the same time, it's very beautiful and very well done. Really, the only weak part of this movie is the title. I mean, White God, like, I get it. It's like how they look up to us and like, oh, you're the White God. It's supposed to be like represented like Western culture being in charge and being at the top of the food chain, but then really not like managing it well. I don't know what I'd call it, but the point is, it's a cool movie. You can download it. It's available online right now. And if you're okay with a little bit of a sad movie that has really ridiculously good acting, a compelling story, and is shot beautifully, then this could be your movie. And like I said earlier, when it all hits the fan, it is awesome. It goes from being sad to being like, okay, now here's all the best parts of Rise of the Planet of the Apes. So yeah, that does it for this video. What's your favorite movie starring animals? It can be animated, it can be live action, it can be happy, it can be sad, it can be a musical. Whatever you want to say, comment below, let me know. And until next time, God bless, stay saucy.